This podcast is a quest for well-being, a quest for a meaningful life through the exploration of fundamental truth. Enlightening ideas, insights on physical, mental, and spiritual health. The inspiration is love. The aspiration is to awaken new ways of thinking that can lead us to a new way of being well. Welcome to Body, Mind, and Soul Healing Conversations.
Imagine that at the moment of your birth, when your body first experienced the sensations of being out of your mother's womb and feeling air for the very first time, you were an open canvas, a fabric of being ready for imprinting with the colors and the human concepts of life. At that instant, were you actually a blank canvas? Were you open in spirit, pure in being, and free of any influences or proclivities? What are your natural tendencies? When you ask yourself the question, who am I? First listen with your mind, then open your emotional heart. You may experience deep and unexplained emotions, reminding you of some forgotten memory of long ago, or dreams of something that you cannot recall or define. Observations of individuals tend to indicate that it is not precisely what occurred to you that remains with you as your reference system in life. It is how you react and believe what happened that matters as you define yourself. Rationally gaze inside yourself and deliberately examine your processes. You may learn more about the mysteries of your mind by examining your responses to the descriptions presented to you during W. Michael King's journey in his book, Atheists Can Get to Heaven, Perspectives from the Journey Beyond the Tunnel of Light. This work is an invitation to make an assessment through your own exploration into what might be a vast unknown, your inner self. W. Michael King's extraordinary journey reveals revolutionary discoveries that transcend across the physical into the metaphysical. By replacing mythology and faith with reason, the meaning and vision of enlightened spirituality for humanity is opened. Valeria Tellis interviews W. Michael King. W. Michael King, Ph.D., is a world-renowned leader in systems integration with electromagnetic waves and fields. He developed internationally recognized seminal research about how electrostatic field boundaries collapse. He has presented courses at major universities such as Oxford and many technology corporations, serving an international client base in systems design. As a counterpoint to his scientific career, he worked with a chain of mentors to resolve conflicts of self-esteem that burdened him in his early life, and gained transcendent awareness to prepare him for a magnificent adventure with his body in the throes of clinical death. Based on his experience, recognizing technical instruction was insufficient to develop positive self-image within students and clients. He expanded his practice to become a trusted advisor, mentor, and coach, spanning the range from battered women to individuals seeking enhancement, to the corporate boardroom and the executive suite. His focus is to help others gain objectivity using reason and logic to build self-esteem, an issue that permeates every aspect of life. His many protégés have thrived in all aspects of their lives. Here is the interview with W. Michael King.
In your own words, who is W. Michael King?
W. Michael King is just W. Michael King myself. I don't hang any labels. I don't hang any conditions. I'm just myself.
That's simple, huh? I have a few warm-up questions for you. before we start talking about your book, Atheist Can Get to Heaven. So, my first warm up question is, what is life?
Well, life to me is sentient consciousness that moves from its organic origins into what we would call spiritual evolution. The first question of life is, does it exist? Yes or no? If we say yes, then it's a question of how do we progress with it? How do we progress our consciousness to get from the organic state to the inorganic spiritual consciousness state? And that's a process that takes a fair amount of time and effort in order to evolve.
Yeah, I know you speak a lot about evolution, human spiritual evolution, that I have other questions about that later on. But for now, what is the opposite of life?
Non-existence.
What is real?
Well, in epistemology, real is knowledge that you can verify. In other words, epistemology is essentially the knowledge of studying knowledge. And that's a process of learning what is valid, what is not valid. It takes what in science we call critical thinking. And that's another complicated project because we have to, in order to be successful, we have to shave off a lot of preconceptions about what all of that is, so that we can get down to the basic roots of ourselves and then evolve from that. But that takes developing objectivity. And in society, it's hard to find objectivity.
And that's what it's real to you?
Yes.
What is the meaning of freedom, Michael?
Not being dependent on others, not being dependent on conditions that hold us back.
Wow, that sounds good. What is your greatest joy?
Oh, dear. Well, in the sense of, it depends on the dimension, but my greatest joy is being able to express myself freely, not just in terms of the organic physical sense, but in terms of the inorganic consciousness sense, that energy projection of consciousness where we can propagate our sense of ourselves anywhere in the universe, anywhere to other evolved spiritual beings. That's joy.
Right. Now, you speak of consciousness. How is consciousness different from awareness?
Awareness is a process of consciousness. If you're not self-aware, if you're not sentient, then you really don't have consciousness, right? And there are a few species that are known to be sentient, organic species that science has verified has a sense of awareness. Dolphins, for one, orangutans, for another. Well, awareness is about your own self and your environment. You have to be aware of who you are, what you're doing. Again, that's a big component of objectivity, being aware of others. Perception of awareness. Most of us have accepted sight and hearing and touch, the normal senses, but perception is a piece of sense that is not well discussed, at least in psychological terms. But we can be aware of others. We can have precognitions of others. We can have perceptions of other events, or perceptions of others or others' presence in the sense of energetic presence. All of those things feed into awareness. They're all senses. And I make no distinction between the normal organic senses and inorganic senses or energy projection senses.
So in a way, one can be conscious but not aware.
True, absolutely.
What is love to you?
It has a lot to do with freedom. I think that most people experience love in the sense of a joy, but they also experience it in the sense of a dependency. If I am good enough, so-and-so will love me. Or I will love so-and-so as long as he or she does the dishes, or whatever the structural part of that is. Most people, I think, and this is just my opinion, obviously, experience what I call conditional love. I will love you if, or you will love me if. True love, in my sense, is not conditional. It's not dependent love. It's a freedom of choice, actually. I don't think of love as I will be dependent on, for example, sexuality for love. I will not be dependent necessarily on gender, or I will not even be dependent on if another person loves me or says. All of those things are dependencies. For me to be absolutely free, I have to have the ability to love as a choice. If I choose to love you, for example, I could make the choice to love you, not in the sense of getting a return from it.
Right. I agree. You have to be able to love without conditions, right?
That's free. That's a big part of freedom.
Do you believe in unconditional self-love?
In the sense of self-esteem, yes. You have to be careful with that kind of a term because a lot of people would say, well, if you love yourself, you're narcissistic. No, that's about. Love is, first of all, predicated upon trust. If there is no trust, there can be no love, period. If there is no trust, there is no respect. If there's no respect, there can be no love. So trust is kind of the foundation of how all of these other components of human sensuality work. If I trust myself conditionally, then I'm a very frail person. If my foundation and my roots of myself would be very, very weak. If, on the other hand, I trusted myself and I knew that I'm using objectivity in order to cross-check myself, validate myself, in the sense of epistemology, again, good word to use for this, then I have a firm basis and I can love who I am without being narcissistic.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah, a lot of sense to me. So it goes back to understanding and knowing yourself, understanding your own self.
Right.
What do you think is the world's greatest need?
Depends how you define the world. First of all, most people need to feel secure. Most people need to feel in control, some control of their lives, something that a lot of societal directions try to usurp from them. And I don't care if it's a political cause or environmental cause or religious cause. Be very wary if somebody says, "I will help you with your consciousness and take you to God or whatever." And oh, by the way, pay me a lot of money. But you find that in political causes. You find it in, the planet is dying. Give me money and I'll take care of that. You find these manipulations everywhere in society. I have one of my daughters is married to a Jewish fellow, and he had a great line the other day. He said, Jews invented guilt, but Catholics perfected it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, you might want to edit that out, but the point is that guilt mechanisms are control mechanisms.
And that's true. And that we'll talk about fear later. I have other questions for you. But for now, let me continue with my warm-up questions. What is the mind and what are thoughts?
Well, thoughts are the process of developing consciousness. Thoughts are the process of how the mind works. Consciousness, to me, is spirituality. Consciousness beyond the organic body is spiritual, by definition, spirit. So thoughts are a process of, scientifically, of data developing and feeding on itself and coming up with consciousness eventually, starting at a very early point, I mean.
Right. So the mind is just consciousness?
Oh, it's consciousness, but it's also perception and it's also awareness, right? If you're not, you said earlier, if you're not aware, then what are you consciousness of? If you have no awareness, whatever, then certainly basic animal instincts, they're aware they're hungry, they're aware of temperature, but they don't think in terms of I am hot or I am cold. They will think like I have an instinct that I need to do something about my environment. I need water. I need that kind of awareness, basic organic functions. Real consciousness happens after the organic needs, the basic fuel, food, water, temperature, and so on, are taken care of and are secure.
What, where, and who is God?
For me, the metaphor of God is not a supreme being, it is the energy of the universe. We are all, every one of us, all beings, every matter, everything is made of atomic structures, subatomic structures. Every atom in your body is basically replaced, and this has been shown by science, about every 7 to 10 years. So 10 years from now, you are not the same being, structurally speaking, as you were. What holds matter together? What holds our body together? Well, it's, believe it or not, electric fields. In between every molecule of your body, there is an electric field. From one molecule to another, you have a separation distance of about 300 nanometers in science. And the field intensity between those structures is about 10 to the seventh, about 10 million volts per meter. The point I'm trying to make is that this kind of energy that can be projected into spiritual energy, actually, that sort of energy is really electric fields. It's a structure of science. It's very, very well known. And those electric fields hold all of us together, hold all matter together. Every rock, every piece of wood, every leaf, every tree is held together by electric fields.
For some reason, it came to mind the immune system. So I wanted to ask you this question. What is the immune system and where is it?
Well, the immune system is the distributive process of counterattacking invaders, basically. And it's an automaton system. It's an automatic system. If the immune system senses something is in place, has invaded that is not supposed to be there, it will attack it and try to resolve it. Those with a weakened immune system don't have sufficient power within the immunity structure to cancel out whatever the offending invader may be.
Right. Does it have anything to do with the electric fields that you spoke of?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, it does, because all structures have electric fields, and including invading viruses, for example, they all have electric fields. The question is, can you do something in manipulating those fields? Now, we're not that advanced in science to know that. We can use electric fields, though, and I write about this in my book. We can use electric fields to change emotions in the mind. That's not well known in society, but it is well known in science. Well, I'm not sure if it's well known in science, but those of us who study field structures know that. And it's not even new discovery. We figured that out in the late 1960s. If you stand in front of a waterfall like Bridal Veil Falls in Yosemite Park in California, at the base of Bridal Veil Falls, there is a negative field intensity of about 2,500 volts per meter. If you stand near those falls, not close enough to get wet, but just in the proximity, if you feel good, if you have a euphoric feeling like closer, my God, to thee, then you are responding to electric fields. You're responding very positively to electric fields. In the average American bathroom, if you turn on the shower at full blast, you will have a negative field intensity about 700 volts per meter. You stand outside your shower, you notice that if you have a shower curtain, it drags into the water stream, right? That's electric fields doing that. And the electric fields are being caused by the water moving through the atmosphere, knocking off electrons as it does it. So these things, if you stand in front of a shower and just let your consciousness relax, you'll feel good. You'll feel good because that kind of a quiescent charge feels psychologically good to humans.
And it does. It's so nature in general. Yeah, I feel a lot more energized and better when I'm in contact with nature, the ground, the ocean, the trees.
Now, if those electric fields wobble in a certain way, and we've done this experimentally. If those fields wobble at a certain rate, if they oscillate at a certain rate, you can get blackouts, nausea, and disorientation because our minds are sensitive to the field motions.
Yeah, because everything's connected, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I can make the simple statement that I think a lot of people won't have too much controversy about, even though there may not be scientists. I could say that our brains are functioning by a bunch of electric impulses, and they are. It's a matrix of electric impulses. And if there's electricity causing impulses and consciousness to exist, then if you have other electric fields influeing it in the environment, then it's going to change the way the brain works. It's kind of like a complementary or interfering signal, so to speak.
Yeah, right. Also affects the thoughts, like not just the body. I feel better physically, but also my thoughts. They tend to be different.
Yeah, it's kind of like bias, if you want to think of it that way. It kind of, if you, yeah, or tendency, maybe bias is the wrong word, but a tendency to feel a particular way or feel either really euphoric in the extreme sense, satisfied in a lesser sense, or really tangled up. You know, you can, if it happens, if the field structures happen that way.
Yeah. So continue with my warm-up questions. I think I have 3 of them here. Where is heaven?
Oh, heaven is a spirit. It's not a place. It's a spiritual condition, which is basically the title of my book. Atheists Can Get to Heaven. Heaven is an inorganic state of being, where the soul is free of the body, and connects to other similarly evolved souls.
So heaven could be here now.
Sure.
Yeah. What do you think is the purpose of your life?
My view is the purpose of anyone's life is to develop self, to evolve self. I use a sense of evolution, but it's the same. To me, it's the same word as personal development. If we have a talent, if we have an ability, and we know we have an ability, then to me, the greatest negative against self is to not develop the ability. Well, we all have the ability to expand ourselves into an ultimate spiritual state of freedom. And that even means organic freedom in that the spiritual state doesn't need food and water and so on that the body needs for support. So I think anyone's purpose in life is to evolve to that condition.
Right. If we get to know, right, that's the purpose, and gets to live it.
Oh, sure.
So my last question for this section, if you knew you had a few hours in your body and the world was listening, what would you say?
That's a challenging question because my first reaction to it is drop negations, drop dependencies that cause you to want to control other people.
And that would be it? That would be the message?
Well, that's the first message because
I like that.
yeah, but you have to start someplace, right? Personal independence that doesn't need some Adolf Hitler telling you how to live and so forth, or a communist telling you how to live. I mean, those are controlling factors, right? So if you can evolve if society to evolve to be organized without those controls, without those demands of being dictated upon how you should live, that wastes energy. So if you can somehow get a freedom beyond that, then things happen in a much more efficient way. You can develop things. I mean, look at the United States from a technology point of view. It's developed well because of freedom of thought.
So in a way, it's taking responsibility. You talk in your book, taking responsibility for our own lives and evolution. And that's a very powerful message that it's hard to do when we need to do the work of unlearning first. That's a great thing to teach children.
Yeah, against every bright idea stand 1,000 mediocre minds.
Why did you write the book, Atheists Can Get to Heaven? And why did you wait so long to do it?
I wrote the book because the concepts of the book are not really about atheism. It's about spiritual conscious freedom. It's about learning to be an independent person capable of love without dependency. It's about thinking for self and processes of learning to think for self, and consequences if you don't. Consequences if, for example, in the book, I was very suppressed by an exorcist. Well, if you believe what the exorcist says and confiscate your own energy into yourself, bad things happen, including to your physical body. So I wrote the book to bring up those themes, to cause people to think for themselves. And after most of the chapters in the book, there are observations, as I call them, which are more psychological discussions of what was said in the previous chapter. So I wrote the book with the idea that it might help some people in the sense of self-development. That's the first reason. The reason it took me so long is because it's a terrifying thing to do. It's so personal. I had to, in order, the book required roughly 4 years of a lot of energy, a lot of overcoming my own conflicts. So I had to push through myself and my own boundaries in order to write the book.
So yes, self-doubt, it's another interesting subject, which has to do a lot with beliefs, programming, and all that. How are atheists different from religious people when it comes to beliefs?
Well, all atheists have beliefs, unfortunately.
Right.
Replacing one belief system with another, right? Like the atheist who says, when you die, that's it. It's all over. That's all it can be. Well, that's a belief structure that I know by my own experience isn't true. Deeply religious people who have a sense of God and spirituality as dictated by the religion act within the sense of how they comport themselves within the rules of the religion. And that's not necessarily a freedom. So they have a belief. They also have a dependency on the religion. They need the religion to feel whole within themselves and to feel affirmation that they are behaving in a way that is accepted. That's one of the things I had to overcome about the book. When I wrote the book, I realized that I had to lose my fear of judgment from other people. I had to get to the point where I could literally say, I don't care what somebody else thinks about me.
What a wonderful feeling, right, Michael?
It is.
To a state of mind
It is.
to have. What is the difference between beliefs and values?
Well, values can be within any belief system. Like if I donate something to a cause or to a religion then it brings me a value in the way I feel about myself. Or if I mentor somebody, it brings a value to me in the sense that I learn something from that person, their experiences, as they relate them to our connection. I have a connection with them. Those experiences enhance my knowledge of themselves, but it also enhances my knowledge of others in society. So it's a value to them, particularly the battered women I have some very deep crater stories of females that have been in really, really desperate circumstances. And the value to them is they get to lead whole lives. The most significant of that required is what's one of the pro bono experiences, but it was 3,400 hours in 5 years. And out of that, I get a magna cum laude graduate who can lead her own life. Now, that's a good feeling for me, but it's also a learning experience for me.
Beliefs could become values and values could become beliefs.
True. Yeah.
They are connected. What about wisdom?
Well, I think of wisdom as being its epistemology. Wisdom is being able to decipher what is efficient for the human state and spirit and what is not. And we all have heard of Occam's razor, and the simplest explanation tends to be the right one. And a lot of people get all tangled up emotionally. They don't know how to get to simple. So wisdom is the preacher, I can't remember his name, back in 1933 that said something like, God, give me the wisdom to change the things I can and the wisdom to know the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? Change the things I can, don't change the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, that's a philosophical observation. So wisdom is being able to understand those decisions, and in order to have wisdom in that sense of that discussion, it's necessary to lose dependency.
Right. Is it possible to live without fixed beliefs and values?
Yeah, it is. And the way that's done is to simply say, and this is a science principle, by the way, we have beliefs and values of things that we can prove, right? Things that are testable, things that we can demonstrate. If we have new evidence that comes along and says, well, that's true, but it has some other component to it, that's wisdom, and you know what you know that you can verify that you know. and the flexibility of being able to make a change. And some years ago, I actually about a lot of years ago, around 1980, and without going into the detail, I published a scientific research paper that broke a lot of it was going to change everything about that particular little itty bitty subject, because it was beyond all common wisdom. And when I first proposed it in front of a symposium about 600 people, I swear if there were 600 people out there with custard pies, they'd all throw them at me. It was, boo, hiss, it can't be, can't be, can't be. It took 5 years for the international community to finally say, I'm right, So I finally figured it out. And I remember somebody about 7 years later, or 8 years later, in another symposium, came up to me, put his arm around me and said, "We're very sorry. I apologize for the way we treated you. You were just 8 years ahead of us." So, but that happens. That happens in science. It happens in human psychology.
Right. It's fascinating how we reject anything that's unknown, that it's new.
Well, everybody thought we had to have rain gods for rain. And we had to go lop off heads and torture people if there wasn't enough rain to support an agricultural society. The Inca and the Maya used to do that, the Aztecs. So we don't need to believe in volcano gods anymore.
Right. In your book, you wrote, "The extension and enhancement of sentient consciousness into metaphysical state of being is a natural progression available only for those who choose to evolve."
Sure, because if you don't choose to evolve, you don't do it.
Yeah. So how did you discover this?
Well, I had a lot of help with a group of holistic psychologists I worked with quite a while ago. They helped to get me out of what were then belief systems that were very degrading. And any belief system can be benefiting, but it can also be a trap. It can be a prison. So they helped shatter those boundaries that I was clinging on to, which were ultimately very self-negating. But that's how I came up with that. So that's how I came up with the observation, because I experienced it.
Right. When you say self-negation, can you elaborate more on that, Michael, please? What do you mean exactly?
Well, self-negation, a great example is depression. People who have a reflex to be depression, and in my case, as I write about in the book, depression became a way of life when I was younger. The depression was a hiding place. If I was so depressed that I felt that I had no power, that I could do nothing, then I was basically hiding from myself, from the world, and all of my energy, and was basically being self-confined into my own prison. Depression is a self-imprisonment, and that's self-negating.
That makes sense to me. Yeah.
And in my case, I got to the point where I was having serious physical symptoms.
In one way or another, we do that. We go through the experience of self-negation. So true.
Yes.
There's one question you ask that's a powerful question. You say, "What is the most important person in my universe?" And your answer was myself. And that would be my answer too. But my question is, at what point did you learn to answer that question this way without any doubt?
Well, that was a process of the same development that started with a holistic psychologist I worked with a long time ago. If I'm not my own person, it means that I'm dependent on somebody else to be that person for me. Do I want to be myself, or do I want to live my life through the images of somebody else, which is impossible to do because you really don't know what the other person is going to say. So it's a statement of that I'm the most important person in the universe, means I take ultimate responsibility for myself.
And that has nothing to do with being narcissistic or selfish, right?
Right, not at all.
How do we know the difference?
Well, people who are narcissistic, that idea of self-worship, I guess, is, for lack of a better term, because it exceeds love, in my definition that exceeds the word love. It's far more of an obsession to self. Being the most important person in the universe is not narcissistic. It's being free to be you. Narcissistic people are trapped. They're trapped in their own self-worship, I'll call it. I don't worship myself, because if I didn't worship myself, then I'd be my own metaphorical God. And that means the belief system is so locked up, I wouldn't be able to make adjustments to it.
So how do we balance this idea, this philosophy of being the most important person, but also allowing others to be their more important people themselves, and loving them at the same time?
Am I allowing the way you phrased it, it was like, okay, I'm the most important person in my universe, right?
Right, right.
Well, you are the most important person in your universe. That means you are an independent person. It means that I am an independent person. Can two independent people collaborate together closely? Well, I would suggest that you and I are doing that right now.
True.
Do I seek to control you? Absolutely not. Do I seek to control the way you think? No, absolutely not. Do I try to impose a belief system on you? No, absolutely not. Do I give you ideas to think about? Yes, absolutely, yes. But that's respecting that you are the most important person in the universe, and I am the most important person in my universe. And to the extent that we collaborate together, our universes collaborate, they combine.
Yeah, I love that the way you said that, you put that together. That resonates true to me. What about control and choice? How do we know when we are controlling and when we are choosing to do something for the other?
Well, I think it's a question of dependency. Controlling generally means establishment of some sort of a power link to gain a result. Um, if you pay me money, I will do this for you, for example. That's not that there's anything necessarily wrong with that, as long as it's a value equation. But to just get power, no. I have no need of power over anybody. Um, and I would sense that you don't either. The idea, um, you asked the question about fear. Well, fear is usually the the concern of loss. It's usually a reflex of, I'm going to lose something. Um, I'm going to lose my life. I'm going to lose this. I'm going to lose power. I'm going to lose money. Generally, fear is an emotional reflex of loss. Um, but for a lot of other people, they go into things like, I fear how so-and-so person will feel about me, or I fear how my ideas will be received, therefore I will not say anything about my ideas. Those are self-negating fears.
Yeah, yeah. So fear has to do with laws, like you said. That's true. So it's almost the sense that you don't have enough. So you're just holding on to the things that you think you have, in a way.
Yeah, but it all gets back to that root question of dependency. If I were dependent on how other people felt about me, I would not be free.
Yeah, and that's true. And talked earlier about, yeah, controlling. So that's a very good subject, because you have a lot of messages to put out there, I would call teachings, but some other people might perceive as trying to control consciousness and trying to change what is. What would you say to that? To all of us authors, actually. That's the work that I do as well.
Well, putting ideas out there, like I think this way, is an idea. It's not a statement of control. It's just an idea. In my book, I suggest a lot of things, and I make a lot of observations that I see through my eyes or have experienced in the sense of a report. This happened to me. This is what happened to me. This is why it happened to me, and this is the observation I have of the consequences of those events. That's essentially what I do in my book, and the challenges and how I personally overcame those challenges. Those aren't controlling thoughts. Those are ideas. And if people think I'm trying to control, then they're very frail, and they're kind of hanging on a belief system that they're trying to defend.
Right, right. Yeah. So giving suggestions, it's fine. It's one of the things that I try to practice myself is the understanding that everything is perfectly fine the way it is. We are nature, we are life itself, and everything is just perfect. There's nothing to be added to, nothing to change. But somehow, consciousness chooses to suggest, like we are doing. Maybe we should do it differently. Maybe people should think more for themselves. Maybe we should eat healthy. That's the paradox, I guess, which life is anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, you talk about also relationships. I found it to be very interesting the way you speak of close relationships and how important they are. And they can help us in our spiritual evolution. Talk to me about that.
Relationships that I call are really connections. They're connections to resources where the ideas of another person are resources. And using conversation, at the moment, I'm a resource to answer your questions. And this in the sense of a relationship or a connection that we have right now. It's limited and defined to the purpose of what we're doing. But at the same time, it's an exchange of information, isn't it? It's an exchange of ideas. So relationships, like you might even have it with a therapist or a doctor, you have a medical doctor relationship and to benefit you, to cure an ill. So any relationship can benefit as long as it isn't controlling.
What are the signs that a relationship has become a controlling one? Well, there is a party that's trying to control the other.
Well, when you're doing it for them and not you.
Right. Right. But that goes back to what you said, your main message. Yeah, take responsibility for your own life and walk your own path.
That's a big enough responsibility for all of us.
It's true. I never thought it that way. And that is so true. It's big enough. Wow. Yeah. Really big.
A lot of people don't master it, yet they go off trying to think they know more than anybody else. No, 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 no.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Wow. And that's the only responsibility, really, in my understanding of life.
Yeah, fundamentally, it all starts with her. Just earlier today, I had an email conversation with a colleague, and who had mentioned to me that his wife was having some depression problem, and I said, I simply said to him, I said, if you think she needs support, I'm willing to volunteer some time. And he sent me back an email a couple of hours later, and he said, no, we have it controlled. We know everything. I'm going to decline your offer. And I said, then great. I said, the reason for my offer was that if I perceived somebody was in trouble and I didn't make the extension and something horrible happened to them because I didn't make the extension, then I would have a responsibility in that. By making myself available and having you decline means I've met my responsibility to myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another great observation. Yeah. That we can still suggest, we can be available, but we cannot force anyone to change. That's a powerful. I heard something really powerful today in a way that I never heard before, but I think it's an old quote that I never read really, that we cannot change anyone in the same way that when that person wants to change, you cannot stop it.
Sure. Yeah.
So I have another question here about beliefs. I probably should have asked earlier, but it's right here down for some reason. Intuition and beliefs. So can intuition replace beliefs?
No. Intuition is a internal perceptional problem. Or situation rather. Intuition can tell us, I am inspired toward some idea, or I am inspired toward a thought, or I perceive that Valeria is blah blah blah, something. Those are beliefs. Those are perceptions. Those are feelings.
Their feelings. Right. And you speak about the present moment, which I have another question to ask about that. But before, most people talk about intuition as something as a guide, that the higher self, and you talk about the authentic self. So isn't it where the authentic self lives in our intuition?
Well, a part of it certainly does. A very powerful part of it certainly does. That's certainly not all of it, but intuition is that idea that somebody, a detective or something says, I intuit that XYZ is a terrorist and is about to do something, because of evidence or something, or because of hints. There are all sorts of ways intuition shows up. Intuition can also be completely self-directed. Like I wake up in the morning and I can have an intuition that Valeria is going to call me today without it being scheduled. So those are also perceptions, right?
Yeah. But intuition is something that I talk with my guests a lot. Intuition and listening to the voice of the heart.
Sure.
That's another term. And that's interesting because when I acknowledge that there's another voice or another higher self within me, I'm also acknowledging that there's two things happening, or more than two even.
Well, I don't think it is being separate, though. I think of it as being not very well integrated. But if people think it's separate because it's like it's a different voice. No. It's a part of you. It's a component of you that is perceiving something, that is motivated by something.
Right. So, do you know anything about the concept, the idea of non-duality?
Not in that term, no.
Okay. So let's not go there. We talked about unconditional love, self-love earlier, and I would like you to talk to me a bit more about unconditional self-love.
Well, Rene Descartes said something like, I think, therefore I am. Well, that's an unconditional statement. It's not an emotional statement. It's a factual statement. I think, therefore I am. Well, that's consciousness, isn't it? It's sentient, isn't it? It's a self-awareness, isn't it? So that's kind of a root bearing of anybody. So now that you think, and now that you know now that you're aware that you are, what do you do with it?
Yeah, right. What do you do with it? Good question. Good question. So I guess my next question. So what do we do with it? What is to live? What is to be evolved? What is to be there? What is the destination?
Well, in my near-death experience, I experienced sentient consciousness absent the body. And that, for those who can get to that stage, it is a continuation that doesn't have a boundary of the physical body. And that, to me, is the goal.
To live that way for eternity, or to come back in the body?
No. Who would want to come back?
Right. Who wants to come back?
But why on earth? If I think I had to come back, if I actually believe that, then I wouldn't be motivated to do the best job I could the first time around. I mean, that's a cop-out. Oh, I can come back and fix it later. No, you can't.
Right. So what is the idea, the soul? So the soul being this entity, or this part of us that lives on?
No. The soul is consciousness. The soul is just consciousness. That's all it is. It's consciousness directed beyond the body.
Okay, so beyond the body. And then, so there's just one thing, right, Michael? There's just consciousness. There's just one consciousness.
Now, there's no duality in saying I have a soul, I have a body. No, that's not the way that. The body provides enough energy to power the consciousness. And if the consciousness can release itself of all the burdens and conditions and dependencies and so forth, then it can be free to migrate beyond the body. Propagate beyond the body, I guess is a better way of saying it.
Right. There's no specific destination for that.
Well, if you're self-directed, you can direct it. You can make a destination as you go along if you have a roadmap. I did.
That really makes a lot of sense. But that also means having so much awareness of that piece of consciousness.
Well, remember everything we know about electromagnetic fields. Because to me, consciousness is just quantum electrodynamics. It's a very complicated science that, by the way, every quantum experiment ever run, quantum mechanics experiment, has always proven itself. It has never failed. As it gets to the point of being so magical, it's like it's spiritual, but it is physical, and it has never failed, not ever. But we know some things about electromagnetic waves. So let me project this. Imagine that consciousness is simply a quantum electrodynamic form of energy, which in science it happens to be. Now, suppose this electrodynamic form of energy projects itself beyond the body, like a transmitting signal. Something we know, and this is hard science, something we know about electromagnetic energy, once it propagates into space, it goes forever. Ever. It doesn't stop. It goes forever. And the light we see from billions of light years away that is coming to us in the universe, that light is electromagnetic energy. A lot of people don't know that light is electromagnetic wavelength. So if the consciousness is a quantum electrodynamic form of energy and it projects beyond the body, it goes forever.
Right. And could be transformed into anything.
Yep.
Wow. So in a way, what we call God, it's just the experience of these electric fields of consciousness, just experience itself in so many.
One of the funny things about religion is they tell you that you have to worship this all-powerful God. Well, if God is all-powerful, why does he need these puny little itty-bitty inconsequential humans to worship him?
Yeah, right.
And if God knows, and this was my big problem with the priest, I write about this in the book in sixth grade. If God knows everything, as religions tell us that God does, if God knows everything, he knows if we're going to go to heaven and hell in their definition of that. Well, if he knows that, what's the purpose of living? Because it's already known.
Yeah.
Does this make sense?
Right.
Not to me, it doesn't. So
no, yeah, of course not.
So either he doesn't know everything, and he's therefore not the God they claim he is, or she, as the case may be. So either that's true, or he doesn't exist at all. Which is, I'm extremely spiritual. I just don't happen to have a God around to do it.
Right. And you're right. And because beliefs, that is really a challenging idea to understand.
We don't need a rain God anymore.
Yeah. I love the way when I asked you, where's heaven? Yeah, there's no heaven. It's here. The same thing is with hell. So heaven and hell, it's here now.
True.
I love that. I love everything about the things you say because it makes sense and resonates with the heart, which I call that place in consciousness in ourselves that is, it feels the truth.
Yeah, I use the body, by the way, and I write about this in the book, in the latter section of the book, because the book is divided into two sections. One is my journey, which is journey way beyond the tunnel of light, and while my body is cycling the clinical death drain. But the second is the perspectives, which is not about the journey; it's about an analysis of the journey, and that's in technical terms we'd call it kind of pedantic. But the general idea of this whole thing is that it's all very, very real. It's all very available to us, and we can move through these various layers of barriers that we ourselves create and are not even aware that unawareness is one of the biggest problems. We don't know necessarily that they're in our way until we bang into them enough times so that we have to find some other approach to use.
Right. So I guess coming to my last questions to you, one of which is, how does it feel to be free?
Well, it's freedom is, you asked me about joy. Well, being free, it's elation. It's happiness.
Yeah, and it
It's
is.
to be unencumbered.
That's beautiful. So, my final questions: how do you define success? What is to be successful in a human body?
Um, to accomplish the mission of whatever the mission may be. I mean, we can, if we remove dependencies, a lot of very wealthy people are very successful in the temporal ground of structure and money and so on. But those who are obsessed with money are very dependent people. They may not spiritually evolve at all anymore. An alcoholic can get out of being an alcoholic without some help in AA or something like that. So uh, people are really strange or no complicated in the sense of dependencies they can form. They can form it on religion. They can form it on religion in the sense of that is being accepted by others. They comport themselves in a way their religion tells them they must do to be accepted by the religious group, and that's dependency. So people can have all kinds of dependencies, all kinds of things, including money. So to me, success is achieving goals. But first, we have to, in order to know that we've achieved the goals, we have to understand in our consciousness, in our epistemology, if the goals are efficient for us, if they're the right sense of what we're trying to accomplish in the broadest sense of our beings. Then a lot of people don't have a clue what that means.
True. It's so fascinating the way you speak of dependency to me. So I'm just wondering, I know it's easy to tell when we are dependent on something, when it becomes an obsession, an addiction, or a habit, bad habit especially. But so my question is, what are the subtle forms of dependency that we might miss out?
Well, I started to say that I use the body as kind of warning signs, right? The physical, that we're doing something wrong, or that we're challenged, or we're in fear, um, or we know on that instinctual level, we know that what we're doing or about to do is just wrong. The body will respond to that before the mind grasps it. Sometimes the heart rate will go up. Sometimes we'll feel very, very cold and trembling even. Because the energy, when we're doing something like that in the body responds. Sometimes it's a spasm or a flash pain in the neck or shoulders, or like a spasm like that. So the body will almost always respond. So I try to have people understand that their body can be a warning signal for their consciousness about how they're about to act. Um, so a lot of people who are actors that are going to go on stage for the first time are overcoming something, and their bodies will be responding. They'll be shaking or trembling or basically fearsome of what they're about to do. So these are things they have to overcome, you know. So the body is a very useful tool in that respect. So
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, and it has been said the body cannot lie, right?
right.
It's a very truthful tool. I agree. What was the hardest lesson to learn about yourself, Michael?
The idea that I had fallen into this trap for decades of withdrawal as a hiding place. And the biggest challenge was to lose that and thrive. That was probably the biggest self-confrontation I had to do, because it was an addiction.
It was harder to tell, right? To discover.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because a lot of addicts don't know they're addicted.
Oh, true. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's as simple as that, really. It's a statement. It's simple to say, but if you're addicted to being self-negating, I listen to people respond to certain things like, I can't do that. Well, there are a few things I cannot do. I cannot pick up an elephant and throw the elephant. That's beyond my capability.
That's funny. Yeah.
But other things that don't involve that sort of physical structure, I really mean won't. If somebody says to you, Valeria, I can't do that. It probably means they won't do that. So then, why not?
Right. And some people won't even answer that question if you ask them. Why not?
Yeah. They won't know to answer the question or ask the question.
Right, right.
So one of the things I look for when I mentor people is very simple. When they just say can't to me, why not?
Yeah, why not? All we have is possibilities, really. So many. I mean, it's infinite. And that's fascinating. Yeah, not to tap into it or not even know about it. Right.
It's true.
If you knew you would die soon, losing the body, would you make any change about your life or do anything differently?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing. No.
Wow. That's wonderful.
I've got nothing. I've got nothing to prove. I've got nothing to. I've got no bucket list. I've lived a very full life, and I'm done with it.
Yeah, and that what says to me is that dying before we die, really. That's what it means.
Uh-huh.
So the last question is, what are 3 things about life you know for sure as of today?
Well, I know that my consciousness is my soul. I know that my goal in life is to evolve myself to the ultimate extent that I am able. And I know for absolutely sure that anything self-negating detracts me from that goal.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the great conversation, Michael. It has been informative, it has been peaceful and true, genuine. Thank you.
Hey, we met the challenge of the iPhone and audio communication.
Oh yeah, that's part of it. Where can we find more information about you, your books, products, services, and future projects?
Well, I really don't maintain a website. I have one for my technical work. I have a website, www.michaelking.com, which carries the burden of my CV and history and some things like that, and the sense of professional life. Other than that, everything anybody really needs to know about me is all in the book. Because things like, doctorate degrees and all that really don't matter.
Thank you so much again, Michael, and we'll talk soon.
You're welcome, Joey, talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about W. Michael King, please visit his website, atheistscangettoheaven.com.
To learn more about this podcast, please visit fitforjoy.org/podcast. I want to thank the Patreon members, Lawrence McGrath, Mark Basden, Terry Clayton, and Aidan Vickrock. Thank you again for listening, and bye for now.